This video, I'm going to talk about the members of Congress and their personal and political backgrounds of the present day members, the major roles they play. That's very important. There's going to be a test question on that. And the compensation and privileges that they get as being members of Congress. So some basic nuts and bolts about that. In this year of 2020, remember that this can be found here in your file, making a copy. And this was, some of this you were supposed to have read, but I want to go through this a little bit in class or in this video, I should say, and talk and discuss it with you. So right now I'm going to hide my fat head because you're going to be distracted by that. I'm going to start talking about some of this information in a little more depth. So you'll need to stop this video at certain points to make sure you're clear on these notes, because there is some information that's on the test on this particular information. So looking at the members of Congress, and you have done what in 2020 you were to done 1 through 4 in class. The average member, older white males, although increasingly more females, less likely to be foreign born. Okay. It's not an accurate cross-section of the nation's population. A lot of upper middle class Americans, disproportionate number of males and whites. Okay, so let's stop there and go through a little bit of that. So I found a good workbook that I really want to post looking at now. And this is the 116th Congress, the most current Congress that's seated. There are 127 female members, 25 in the Senate, 102 in the House, well less than half of the proportional to population. So this represents the actual population of the United States, of men, women. This is the men in Congress. These are the women in Congress. So it's increased over the years, but there's still a long ways to go to see a little bit more of gender diversity. So 76% male, 23% female. Race, again, the highest proportion is Black people, who are at 9.3% of congressional seats, but 12.6% of the population. Hispanics, 6.2%, yet they're 16.9% of the population. Whites account for the largest portion of the population in the United States, but are at 76.8% in Congress. So again, religion, largely Christian, even more so than the population. So 83% of the people, this Congress is Christian, identifies as Christian, but 70.6% of the nation is. Jews are pretty overrepresented under Muslims, and Buddhists are way underrepresented. And about 1/3 and 2/5 respectively is actually not a religion at all. Unspecified none. Only 7.5 hold the title unspecified none. So Muslims and Buddhists are very underrepresented in Congress. And nobody represents total the groups of atheists and other religions are 9.5%. Not a single member of Congress or affiliates that way. So you see, these are the gender makeups of the dark gray represent men, light blue represent women in gender, and the Republican Party is a little bit more less diverse. 91% are men, 8.3% are women, whereas in the Democrats, 62-37 men to women, even though that's still underrepresenting women as a total. Race, way underrepresented. 6.3% are something other than non-white. 93% of Republicans, but Democrats are much more diverse. Religion, same thing. The chart shows a breakdown of Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, and Muslims. But there are only 2 Jewish, no Hindu or Buddhist members of the Republican caucus. So again, Christians 95%, 73% Democrats. So again, way overrepresented with Christian. And you could go into more sexual orientation and so on. But you can see that Congress as a whole, just by looking at this, is not as diverse as the population as a whole, and that's the major takeaway from this. They're just not as diverse. The next thing to talk about is the 5 major roles that members of Congress play. And this is going to be a test question. Legislatures, they make laws, right? Legislatures Representatives, those are representatives of the people, representatives of their district, of their people. Members of committees, that every member of Congress serves on committees, standing committees, and then they move up to ranking member or higher member based on their seniority. Are they servants? They're servants of the people. They're servants of their constituents. And then politicians. And remember, the aim of politicians is to win the next election. The idea of winning the next election is very important to people who are politicians. So they play all of these particular roles in Congress. But they have to play how much they play them and how much time they spend playing them depends on where they're at. If they're in a legislative session, there might be more legislatures. If they're back home, they might be more representatives serving on committees, etc. Politicians, these are the people that are pulled by the special interests, right? And as legislators, they might be pulled by the special interests and not be as representative. So their roles are intertwined, right? Their roles are intertwined and sometimes end up in conflict with one another. What is the number one job of each and every member of Congress? To represent their constituents. Do they always do this? Sometimes they're, as we've learned, they represent, depending on what money they're getting from the political action committee, they might represent the interests of the special interests and whatever group that's having a sway or influence on them. How much are members of Congress paid? They do this through law. There's actually the 27th Amendment actually stipulates that you cannot, if Congress passes itself a pay raise, it doesn't take effect until the next term. It doesn't take effect in the current term. So if Congress right now were to pass a pay raise, it wouldn't take effect until the next term. So the next term being starting in January 3rd of 2021 after this election. What are the fringe benefits that members of Congress enjoy? If you just write down the stuff, okay. So in the first couple of paragraphs, this is, I think, a top thing. So franking, there's many of them. Franking privileges is free mail. This is important because while they're not allowed to send out campaign mail, they can send out mail that is informing their constituents at any time of year. It doesn't have to just be campaign season, of what they're doing and how to communicate with them. Free medical care. They have excellent health benefits. Low insurance rates. Excellent health benefits for low rates for and even personal insurance. Office of money to pay for staff. Every member of Congress has an office. There are 3 or 4. There's 2 or 3 House office buildings. There's 2 Senate buildings that are very, these are paid for by the taxpayers. You can actually go into when you go to DC. It's very fascinating. I think it's fascinating. I know you wouldn't, that you can actually go to in DC to visit the members of Congress. They also have, a home office in their home district or their home state. An excellent pension plan. They don't even have to serve very long. You can be a one-term congressman and have pension for life. It's really good. Use of government vehicles. So while the pay itself is pretty modest, they get money from other sources, and in-kind gifts and so on that keep them pretty wealthy. And a lot of them come from a wealthy background anyways. May have made money in other businesses. What are 2 limits to congressional pay? Again, the president could veto, and then voter backlash if they end up giving themselves too much of a pay raise. Voter backlash. And then what are some privileges that members of Congress also receive? They are really, while speaking in session, they're protected from libel or slander. So while they're on the floor or they're in committees, they can nobody can sue them for libel or speaking out against someone or slander of people. They can't be sued for what they say on the House floor or in committees. And they can't get arrested while they're in their session. You can't haul off a member of Congress. Doesn't mean they couldn't be arrested outside of that, but they can't be arrested while they're in session on the floor. You get the police that can't come in now. So in other words, there is actually a lawmaking, a law enforcement agency, and I do this in my law class, called the Capitol Police. And the Capitol Police are there to protect the Capitol. They don't actually arrest members of Congress, although I suppose they could, but for being unruly. But they don't. Remember, libel is written defamation of people, and slander is spoken. But again, if they're doing this in their official capacity, it's very difficult to sue people, members of Congress, for libel or slander. So the biggest takeaways is really to look at the 5 roles. and really consider these 5 roles. Legislatures, representative, whether the representatives of the people, serving in committees. Are they servants of the people? Are they servants of the people? And are you politicians? Politicians, again, remember the goal of a politician is to win the next election. And so they're doing these, simultaneously, but which one dominates is the major question.